Hey everybody, welcome back to another fun and exciting Algebra 2 class. Today we are going to continue on with lesson 7.1. Didn't quite finish it in the last video, so wanted to finish it here. Shouldn't take too long, so don't worry about that. Let's try to get through these next little pieces here of lesson number 1. In the first part of the lesson, we talked about how sometimes when you take a function, you can invert the function, basically switching, flipping the x and the y, and then solving for y. Well, what happens is sometimes when you do that, the inverse has more than one answer. So in other words, the inverse is not a function. The function is a function, right? Okay, because the function has to be a function if it's a function. All right. If not, then it's not a function, so you can't find the inverse of not a function. Is everybody confused now? Okay, because I am. So in other words, if you take the inverse and it has more than one answer, the inverse is then not a function. We have a word for that. It's called one-to-one functions. If you look on page 327, you'll see that one-to-one functions on the top of the page. Here's what that means. A one-to-one function means that both the original equation is a function, so the function is a function, and this is an important word right here, and its inverse function are functions. So not only does the original function have to be a function, but also the inverse has to be a function. So the original and its inverse have to be functions in order for it to be what? In order for it to be what's called a one-to-one. Now, one-to-one, that all that means is that both the original and the inverse are both functions. Could you have a function that doesn't have an inverse function? Yes. You can have a function that is not one-to-one. Now, you can still find its inverse, but the inverse would not be a function. I'll show you that here in a little bit, what that means. In other words, here, look down here, I got this written. It says the inverse of some functions yield more than one solution. Remember, the definition of a function is only one solution. So if the inverse yields more than one solution, then the inverse is not a function. So functions, one solution, inverse functions, one solution. That is what's called one-to-one. And that's what we want to talk about here in this lesson. All right. Let's keep going. What are some ways to test to see if it's a one-to-one? Are there ways that we can find out? Yes, there are. One of the ways is what's called the horizontal line test. Now, maybe you remember, hopefully you remember, from the lesson on functions, the vertical line test. And what the vertical line test said was that if we have a line, and if we test that line, all right, let's make this green line be the test line. And so we're going to test a vertical line. If it touches it once, it's a function. If it touches it more than one time, so in other words, if we have something that looks like this, okay, and it touches it more than one time, then that is not a function. Remember that when we did the graphing, how to test? One time, vertical line test. One time, function. More than one time, no function. So now here's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about what's called the horizontal line function, because let me show you what we're really doing. So if we have here's our function, okay? When we invert the function, I'll put the inverted function in the pink line. What we're doing is we're kind of turning, if you will, our graph. And so what we're going to do is instead of now the vertical line test, we are going to use what's called a horizontal line test. Why would we do that? Because we want to find out if the inverse is a function or not. So here's what we do. There's our graph. Here is our line. Okay. Let's say that this is our inverse. In fact, let me do it with the pink line so you can know. Let's say that this is our inverse function. So this is our inverse line. So we graph the inverse. Now we do a horizontal line test. The white line will be the horizontal line test, and we can test it anywhere that you want to. It doesn't matter where you test it. Here's the question. How many times does it touch the line? Does it touch the line one time? Then it's a function. Does it touch the line more than one time? So let's go back and let's put a different one on here. Let's put this one on here. Now this one, check this out. Let's first of all test it with the vertical line test. Vertical line test, how many times does it touch? One time. So it is a function. This pink line is a function. But let's find out if it's an inverse function by the horizontal line test. Well, look, 1, 2, 3, 4. It is not an inverse function because it failed the horizontal line test. It passes the vertical, okay, one time, and no matter where we put the vertical, it only touches it once. So it doesn't matter where you put the vertical line, it only touches it once. So it passes the vertical, but it fails the horizontal because it touches it multiple times. Okay, so that's the horizontal line test. So that's an easy way to kind of check your inverse functions to see if they are one-to-one. The other way to do it is just to do it algebraically. What do I mean by that? Just solve it, okay? And when you solve it, if it has more than one answer, not a function. So let's try it. So here is our inverse function. That's the pink line. Is it a one-to-one function? Well, we need to put on a horizontal line. Put on a horizontal line, touched it one time, function. So this one is function, okay? Actually, let's call this, instead of function, let's call this one-to-one. I'll call it 1-to-1, okay? So this is a one-to-one. Now let's check out this one. So here's a parabola. And let's first of all look at its vertical line test. Okay, how many times does it touch the vertical line? One time, right? No matter where we put it, it touches one time or it touches not at all. Now, let's test the horizontal line test. Uh-oh, problem. We have it touching twice. So this is not one-to-one. Not one-to-one, okay? This one is one-to-one because it passes the horizontal line test. This one is not one-to-one because it fails the horizontal line test. Now let's check it algebraically, okay? So how do you check this algebraically? Well, you just have to solve it. How do you solve it? Well, remember how to solve for the inverse. We just switch the x and the y. So now we're going to have x equals negative y plus 3. Now we have to solve for y. On this one, probably the easiest way to do this is to take the y over here and the x over here. So we're going to subtract x and we're going to add y to both sides. Okay, so that's going to cancel and we're going to get y equals, that's going to cancel 3 minus x. We can write it that way, no problem. So the question that you ask yourself now is, does that have one solution or does that have multiple solutions? So in other words, when I put anything in for x, I can put anything I want in for x. X equals 10. How many solutions do I get for y? Well, 3 minus 10, what's 3 minus 10? Negative 7. Y equals negative 7. One answer. Let's put something else in for x. Whatever we want. Negative 8. Okay? 3 minus 8. Well, minus means plus. 3 plus 8 equals 11. Y equals 11. One answer. Okay? So in this case, this one is a one-to-one. Why? Because this one passed the test when we solved it algebraically. Its inverse, which is that right there, because we solved it, that was the inverse, would only ever yield one answer. Okay? So one input, one output. All right, let's look at the next one. All right, so we have here y equals 4 minus x squared. What we do is we swap these out, remember. X equals 4 minus y squared. Now we want to solve for y, so we want to get y by itself. I'm going to tell you that it's probably easiest to do the same thing we did. Keeping things positive is always good. Plus y squared minus x, and so we're going to swap those out. So we're going to get y squared on this side equals 4 minus x, because that cancels and that cancels, and we switch them over there, okay? Now I want you to see something. Our solution is not done yet because we have this. How do we get y by itself? Well, we square root both sides, right? So when we square root both sides, that cancels and we get y equals, and we have to do something. Don't forget we have to do something right here. We have to put a positive and a negative 4 minus x. Well, let me tell you, as soon as you get that positive and negative, guess what? Two solutions. One's a positive solution, one's a negative solution. And so this one is not 1-to-1. That one is not 1-to-1, okay? Because we have more than one solution. If the inverse has more than one solution, it is not 1-to-1. All right, I told you that was going to be a fast lesson, right? I got that one done in 11 minutes. So, all right, well, I hope you learned something there. If you missed something, make sure you slide it back there and check it out. Try some of these. Go to the exercises and take a look at them and see if you can figure some of these out, okay? All right, you have a good one. Bye-bye.